live. Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to Icons with Ava Johanna. We have, technically speaking, some repeat guests, but for Icons, this is their first official debut. Jess Suchan and Candace Birch of Your Hormone Balance are joining us today. And I feel like this conversation is going to be so timely for so many of you because we are going to be diving into one of the most important topics for female entrepreneurs, which is our hormones, stress resilience, balance, how we can be everything, do everything, create everything in our businesses, but also be able to bring balance, softness, and overflow into our relationship, into our family life. So many people that are listening to this podcast are on the precipice of starting families, have already started families, are just finding out that they're pregnant with their firstborn. And to me, this is one of the most important conversations that we can have because our success and our businesses are not set up just so that we can have success and have a business, but how they can support the rest of our lives. So my intention for bringing Jess and Candace on is to give you everything that you need to set yourself up to holistically be successful, to nourish your body, your mind, your hormonal system, your reproductive system, and to thrive in all areas of life. So Jess, Candace, thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to have this conversation with y'all today.
Thanks for
Thank
having us. We're excited to
yeah.
be here and to see your beautiful face.
I
It's
know
going
it's
to be a
been,
good conversation.
yeah, it's been a hot minute. So background for everybody, Jess and I met like 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, while I was living in LA. Jess, had you already started Body Bliss by Jess at that point?
I had, but I don't know if you remember, we met at this cafe and we were like still just really trying to figure out what we were doing. And I just like, I mean, I know for me at least, I was kind of just trying to figure things out. And to see where you were at that point to where you are now, it's so incredible to have watched your growth and just the expansiveness and this community that you've created. And like, you're just on fire. And I've loved like kind of seeing it as like a fly on the wall, but also just now seeing the evolution of your podcast and just this meaningful work that you're doing with so many women. So it's really, really cool to be the full circle moment.
Mhm.
Oh, ditto. I love that. And I also want to share, I remember hearing you both on the Almost 30 podcast years ago and driving. I think this was when I still lived in San Diego and I would drive up to LA to do podcasts, to go to events, to try and get my foot in the door at Aloe because I was just like at the beginning, hustling, trying to make it work. And I remember it was during a period of time where my gut health was a mess. I had really bad hormonal acne. And listening, Candace, to you sharing about our hormones and stress and cortisol levels. And it was mind blowing to me. Like it was one of those moments where I can viscerally remember being in the car having these aha moments and these breakthroughs and knowing like, oh, I got to have them on my podcast one day. And so I'm so grateful that we're here.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
here
didn't
we are.
know that. I love that. Thanks for
That
sharing
was
that.
that,
I had no
that was
idea.
actually our first podcast. I think that,
Wow,
yeah, I think
I think
so.
it was one of our first. Yeah.
that's
Yes.
awesome. That's so cool. Well, incredible first podcast that
Yeah.
We
I
got
know.
really busy. We got really busy after that. It was obviously resonated as you're describing with a lot of other women too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, it was a period of my life where all of these physical symptoms were the byproduct of how I was operating on a day-to-day basis. And that's why I'm really excited for today's conversation because, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but I feel like the physical is kind of the last piece to show after we've really been potentially stuck in poor habits or poor lifestyle choices that lead us to eventually physically start showing the symptoms. So I'm curious your take on that because I feel like a lot of people, once it gets to the physical point, it's something that's been going on for months, if not years, that they've been doing kind of without knowing the impact of it.
Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts too, Mom. But from my perspective, I've been there, so I know exactly what you're talking about, where you kind of just shove down the messages from your body. And now I really see it like symptoms or messengers. And our body doesn't have a physical, it doesn't have a voice, it can't communicate with us. So it does communicate through symptoms. And someone once told me, I don't know the origin of this quote, but basically, you have to listen to the whispers of your body before they become screams.
Mhm.
And so often we push down the whispers. And for me, I've always, and it's something I'm still going through, but I've always struggled with migraine headaches. And for me, a big component of that is stress. There's other triggers, but in the past, I would start to get a headache or a migraine, and it was like, shut up, I don't have time for you right now. I would just throw medication at it. And then, I would just try to deal with it later. And then I would be so stressed out from work that I would have this debilitating anxiety. And the way that I handled it at the time, I was working at a marketing firm in West Hollywood. It was very glitzy, glammy, like a lot of cool points, for free juice Fridays and rooftop happy hours, but they work you to the bone and never really slept. I was in the social media department. So it was like just sometimes I had to wake up at 4 a.m. because we had, a client that was launching on the East Coast. And at other times, I would have to stay really late. And then I remember I would drive to the beach with my husband, and I would panic once we started to lose Wi-Fi on the weekends, because it was like, oh no, what if a client tries to email me and I'm not available? And then I couldn't be present. I was just anxious the whole time, checking on my phone. And that I would quiet it through things like bottomless mimosas on the weekend with my friends, and going to high intensity HIIT training workouts, and thinking like, oh, that's my therapy. And, doing other things like venting or gossiping with girlfriends, which, looking back on it, every once in a while, okay, sure, but it is pretty toxic to be in that environment, around noticing that, you start to attract other people that also are burning the candle at both ends, and maybe also don't have the best relationship with their body, which I also didn't. So I turned to food as a coping mechanism, and I would restrict my food because I felt so out of control in other parts of my life. And then I would binge on it when it got to the point where it was too extreme. And then because I was doing that, I also really messed with my hormones and had all of these hormonal imbalances. I didn't have a true period for 4 years. And it was like this culmination of all these different things. And so for me, it really had to take hitting rock bottom. And even though I was raised by a health educator mom who's sitting right here, who's always, who's always been so open and has always said, if you ever need help, if you ever need support, I'm here, to the point where anytime we went home to, between breaks in college, she would bring out her homeopathy books and her natural healing books and a million different tinctures. Like when I think of my mom, I think of a million different herbal tinctures in our fridge, and like, open your mouth, and it would be one tincture in the mouth, and then another one's like, Mom, what's in my mouth right now? And the kid goes, what is going on? And like, elevate your legs. And she was so supportive. And even when I decided to get on hormonal birth control, even though there wasn't a lot of great alternatives for non-hormonal options back then, she really wanted me to think about that choice. And I felt like that education was really rare to actually to have somebody who is sharing, here are some of the potential repercussions. But I did it anyway. And as we do, as we get older, we kind of rebel against our parents, and we kind of have to go down our own path. And I didn't want to turn to her for help when I was in the thick of everything, because I knew that it would require me actually doing the deeper work. I knew that it would require me transitioning off hormonal birth control. I knew it would require me stopping the extreme yo-yo dieting that I had been doing for 12 years, which I didn't want to release control of that because I was so terrified of gaining weight. And I knew it would require, okay, maybe I need to scale back on the alcohol and, introduce actual self-care into my life outside of just binge drinking. And, the occasional massage. Like if I got a massage, it was like once every 3 months, and that was a huge deal. So I think in my personal experience, it was like I ignored the whispers for so long, and they just became such loud screams that I was at this breaking point and I was like, I have to make a change. And so I did. And it's really what propelled me into the work I do now as a holistic health and mindset coach, because I learned through my own journey, wow, like we really have to do a better job of building stress resilience so that when we get to the plate, so that we don't have to wait until we get to burnout, to your point, to then start to make changes in our life. And so without going too much further down the rabbit hole, I think it really is about the daily practices, the learning to strengthen that mind-body connection, to have a solid morning and evening rituals, even if they're just a few minutes long, and to know that self-care is a necessity, and to redefine self-care, to be beyond just a bubble bath or a manicure, and to really dive into these other resources like breath work, which you obviously know so much about, and somatic movement and journaling and rewiring of limiting beliefs. And it seems like a lot, but once you get into it, you're like, I wish I knew this so many years ago. Like, I wish. I don't have regrets because it's what brought me to where I am now. And I'm able to help women from this place of having to help myself. But I just wish that more women had these tools and realized it doesn't have to be so hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's well. Did you want me to comment on that, or are we?
Yeah, I have notes that I took while Jess was talking, so would love to hear
Okay.
also your
Passing the
side.
baton.
Well, I was just sitting here thinking you probably didn't want to ask my help because you would have needed to tell me all these things that were going on
That too. Yeah, that too.
I wasn't completely aware of the I guess I wasn't aware of how extreme the situation had gotten. I was worried about the PR job, which I knew was over the top. But, Jesse, like so many of you, I graduated in 2008 into the recession, and wasn't it 2008? Graduated college, and it didn't seem like anyone that came out during that time with a degree could use it in any meaningful way. And it was sort of the beginning of the gig economy and people becoming entrepreneurs, and, following their dreams and acting upon great ideas. But isn't it such a huge responsibility? And it's it's an uncharted territory that when you embark on that, it takes guts and courage, but it also takes balance in your life and getting enough sleep and ovulating and all those things that maintain physiologic balance in your body. And when you're not in that place, when you're just going for it and hustling, as you were describing, Ava, so, it's just really the pressure builds. And I think bottom line, what the challenge is that the accumulation of stress, and I always try to say stress shouldn't have, a bad rap all the time, nor should cortisol, the stress hormones. We have to have them to survive. Our adrenals make cortisol to get us up in the morning, to power us through the day, to put us to sleep at night. They regulate the sleep. The adrenals are producing cortisol every day on a 24/7 basis. It's our stress response. It's how we take stress in stride, from being cut off in traffic to, some coworker driving us crazy, to actually having financial woes or difficulty in toxic relationships, or, just kind of unresolved chronic things that go on and on. That's when stress tends to accumulate and become the sort of bad stress, because we have good stress, don't we? We love our careers. We may be working like crazy because we love what we're doing, or we may be, burning the candle at both ends because we've got a social life that we love, or we've got kids, but we've got to work. Like I used to pull all-nighters because I had children and I was a journalist, health journalist, and I couldn't get my work done unless I stayed up all night. So it was kind of a good stress. It was a great idea to, get things done, a great way to accomplish all that I wanted to accomplish. But at a certain point, your adrenal glands can't meet the demand. And a key part of this is that women, when we're talking about women entrepreneurs, we're talking about a stress buildup that can cause a lack of ovulation. So, and it's important to understand the different stressors. Like stress can be overtraining, workouts that are too extreme every day, all high intensity and no low impact, or balancing with yoga or stretching or swimming or deep breathing. It can be under eating, which Jess knows so well from her work, how many women are not getting enough protein in their diets or good fats, those two in particular being the building blocks of hormone production. We can't be running on empty with those macronutrients and expect to be making hormones properly and or ovulating. And the big thing with not ovulating is that if you don't ovulate, you don't make the right component of hormones. Ovarian hormones are testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. And progesterone in particular, we don't even make at all if we don't ovulate. So you can have a period and not ovulate. And that cycle, you will have very little progesterone on board to balance estrogen, which is a growth hormone. Just a little spiel here on the hormones. Estrogen is that hormone that is the female growth activator. It grew all of our female organs, our ovaries, our uterus, our breasts, it's growing the egg and the ovary first half of the cycle in the follicular stage. It's building the lining of the uterine lining, the endometrium, which we shed as a period. So estrogen is all about growth, which we must have, but we also have to have balance. We have to keep growth in check, and estrogen's counterpart is progesterone. So all that growth in the first half of the cycle then should lead to ovulation. The egg in the follicle should go on down the fallopian tube to find that friendly sperm, and somewhere in there that ruptured follicle becomes the corpus luteum. This is why we call the second half of the cycle the luteal phase, because this magical thing happens. The ruptured follicle becomes a whole new organ. The corpus luteum then starts producing progesterone the whole second half of the cycle. If that doesn't happen, if we don't have that ovulation, that egg doesn't release, we don't make progesterone. Then that's when everything kind of goes wonky. That's when estrogen it continues to build and become too excessive relative to progesterone. That's when we get heavy, painful periods, because that lining is building up and we don't have that control from the progesterone. So now we're getting heavy, painful periods. We're having mood swings, PMS, all those 150 different symptoms of PMS. So linked with too much estrogen and not enough progesterone. And the adrenal glands also, when you talk about stress, they're there to make that cortisol to help us take that stress as we go, in a normal pace. But without that progesterone, the adrenals can't even make enough cortisol to take us through the day. So it gets down to some fundamentals. Yes, it's good to be crazy busy. I remember before the pandemic, everyone sort of described their lives as crazy busy. And I used to think, okay, so you're loving it. You're loving the action. You're loving being busy and needed and indispensable to so many people. But it really, after a while, it takes its toll. And is that an admirable place to be? I just talked to a woman the other day that said, I work out like a crazy woman, and I can't lose this weight. I'm sure Jessie could enlighten us on that. But it is still this, we're so attached to doing rather than just be, we can't just be being all the time, but we can't also just define ourselves as what we're doing and feel like if we're not doing something, we're useless and hopeless. So there's a lot more to say, but I don't want to go on and on. I could.
Yeah, no, I love this so much. And there's like a couple questions that came from what both of you shared. So Jess, I'll go back to one of the things that you shared around not having a true period for like 4 years. So I'm curious, when you say a true period, and maybe both of you can weigh in on this, what are the markers of a true period besides bleeding? Because I imagine that there was probably some bleeding that occurred, but I'm curious for anybody that's listening that heard that and was like, oh, how do I know if I'm having a true period? Like, how do we know?
Yeah, well, the reason I say true period is because for part of that time I was on hormonal birth control and specifically the pill. And there's this big misconception that when you are on the hormonal birth control pill that you have a period because a lot of women have a bleed week, which is like the sugar pill week, and it's just a withdrawal bleed. It's not actually a true period that you would get if you weren't on hormonal birth control. The reason there's a withdrawal bleed is because when the pill was first created, marketers worried that women would freak out that they didn't get a period. And so they added the sugar pills to add this withdrawal bleed that felt like a period, but it's not actually a true period. And so then that's why I say true period. But then when I came off of hormonal birth control, even though I had my mom's support, we tested my hormones, which we offer now through our family business. We test my hormones in saliva, and we uncovered estrogen dominance and adrenal dysregulation. And I mean, literally everything was out of balance, low testosterone. And so we had to essentially replete all of these nutrients that had been depleted because the pill specifically depletes a lot of key nutrients like magnesium, vitamin C, selenium. And so we had to replete. And then I also had to really work on balancing out my diet and bringing back in more foods and protein and carbs that I'd been restricting for so long. So for me, with all of the support that I had, it still took me about a year to regain a natural cycle. And so when I was on birth control, I didn't have a true period. And then when I came off of birth control, I didn't have a period at all. Like there was no bleed for a year. And then I finally regained a natural period. And there can definitely, for some women, if your hormones are out of balance, you might have irregular cycles, which means that maybe you have longer or shorter cycles, or maybe you skip a cycle. A lot of times if you skip a cycle, which I actually heard a lot of women were missing cycles during the pandemic. And I actually skipped a full cycle as well during the pandemic because of all the stress. And so ovulation, as my mom was explaining, that's the main event of the menstrual cycle. And these different stressors, like she started to talk about like the high intensity exercise, the yo-yo dieting, the chronic undereating, burning the candle at both ends, which I know we said a few times. And there's other stressors like toxins from the environment, but also from the foods that we eat and the personal care products that we use. And just the stress of putting everybody else first and yourself on the back burner. And then traveling, if you're somebody who travels a lot for work, or you have night shift work, or you have like an imbalanced circadian rhythm, you might notice if you go on vacation and you go somewhere that has a completely different time difference, that maybe your cycle gets a little irregular, you skip a period. All of those things are stressors that impact ovulation and can cause you to skip a period, which means that you're then not producing progesterone, and then that goes into what my mom was already explaining.
Right. Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just waiting to see.
Oh, yeah. So I guess that goes into my next question just regarding progesterone and ovulation. Candace, you mentioned that even if we do get a period, we might not be ovulating. Is that correct from what you said?
Mm-hmm. Right. Or there's also something called luteal insufficiency where you ovulate, but the corpus luteum, that little magical organ I was talking about, doesn't form properly and or doesn't make enough progesterone that cycle. So you can have an inadequate level. And on test results, we can see that because we'll look at the estrogen level, the progesterone, and the ratio between those two. So generally, if you can actually see levels that are within range, they may be borderline low or borderline high, or, high or low. But if they're in range, but the ratio's off, that is a real telling measure of the proportions, and it indicates that the proportions are off. If the progesterone estrogen ratio is low, it means there's not enough progesterone on board to balance the amount of estrogen you have. So that's something I always have to explain to people. Yes, and let's say somebody has an estrogen level that's within range. Their progesterone is kind of borderline low and the ratio is low, then I have to explain that even though your estrogen is within range, it is still too high relative to how your progesterone is looking. And that's going to be linked to, that's the reason, that's the culprit behind why you're having PMS symptoms, particularly before women before their period start to feel so lousy, so crabby, their kids are running away from them. I always describe that when I was a mom at a late blooming mom and having these hot flashes, night sweats, and not sleeping and drinking too much caffeine and horrible mood swings all the time. I was actually scaring my kids, and I'm sure that people can relate to that. Jesse and Ryan were just little, they were 6 and 3 or something like that. And I always tell the story of Ryan looking at me one day with tears in her eyes, just like she didn't recognize this mean mommy. And I really that was a moment. And I've talked to so many moms that have said, in fact, just last week, I was talking to a mom who said, I just have to get a handle on my emotions, on this, the way I feel, my periods are off, or when I do have a period, I'm just screaming Mimi and I'm hurting my kids and I know it. And I'm worried that I can't control my emotions. I can't control my moods. What can I do? She's living in a state of fear and anxiety. But yeah, just that simple mechanism of that doesn't, if that rhythm is off, then we are off in a million ways that, it's even hard to count the many ways. And that's one of the reasons that, when we talk about making changes, having the right mindset to be able to approach what we need to do in our lives, like with that woman, how can I control my emotions, starts with awareness of symptom awareness. Since we had that first podcast ages ago on Almost 30, I think the awareness of symptoms of imbalance has become much more widespread. I'm really impressed. I'm not saying it was just us, but it was, it's been a momentum of talking about, I think actually during COVID, people became much more self-aware of how they were feeling. There was more time to sort of contemplate your navel and to notice your symptoms. And symptom awareness is just the first step towards towards the change that you need to make. It's the first simple step. Jesse always talks about small steps. Well, we begin there with, different learnings, as in heavy, painful periods. My mother had them, my aunt had them, my sister had them. They must be normal. They're not, it's not, not to blame anyone for having a heavy, painful period. We are unwittingly having these problems, not knowing what's going on. But that's not a normal state of affairs, nor is turning into Jekyll and Hyde right before your period, or being unable to get out of bed, or being able to fall asleep or stay asleep, or any of the myriad things that women are experiencing and thinking, well, this must just go with the territory. I mean, don't accept that that's the case. Accept that those things are symptoms of imbalance that can be tackled. And confirming those symptoms are messengers. Absolutely. I always say many women become their symptoms. They're not listening. Exactly what Jesse was saying. They're the whispers. They're the early whispers, the warning signs, and we push them away. We don't want to hear it. We don't have time for this. And, that's a perfect symptom of what the problem is. No time, but pushing those away and not, listening is the first challenge that we need to overcome, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was very much in that boat of, oh, my mom had really painful periods, my mom had migraines, then it's just like, it's hereditary, it's genetic, like I'm just gonna have to deal with this my whole life. And podcasts and resources and your family business, along with other books and things that I've learned along the years, have helped me to realize, like, no, that's actually not the case. We don't have to settle for every single month being in so much pain that we can't get out of bed, or every other week being debilitated by a migraine, like that means that something is wrong. And Jess, I can totally relate to you. When I worked in the digital marketing, I was the same exact way. Like that was my life to a T. And I literally, it was just so normalized in that culture that you don't
Yeah.
think anything different about like other healthier choices and healthier ways to live your life. I'm a huge proponent of testing because I think that there's just so many different variables that play into why we experience the symptoms that we do. And I think that in the age of social media and information, it can be really easy to get pulled in a million different directions based off of what you see other influencers sharing, or even, conversations even like this. Someone might listen to and be like, oh, because Jess had these same symptoms, I must tackle the same exact things that she tackled. But I've found that through testing, you actually just get very clear cut answers as to what you are experiencing. So, can you break down a little bit about like if someone is listening to this and is thinking, oh, maybe I should get a test, or maybe I have some sort of imbalance happening, what would you say are like the main things to look out for where you would say you should absolutely get some testing done, like symptoms wise?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I would say all of the PMS symptoms, like she
Mhm.
said, PMS is common, but debilitating PMS is not normal. So if you have a little bit fuller boobs, you are more tired, you don't feel like being as social, you're hungrier before your period, all of that is normal, like totally normal. And there's ways to embrace that and to lean into that and actually use that to your advantage. But things like really painful periods to the point where it hurts to hug somebody, which I used to have. It was like so painful. To the point where I like couldn't even really work out sometimes because it hurt so bad. Or if you have, yeah, really bad cystic acne that is coming, cyclically, or if you're dealing with mood swings that are really intense. I've had several clients that called it premenstrual rage, similar to what my mom experienced, where they're just like, what the heck just came out of my mouth? And they've gotten so emotional on our calls because they're like, I feel so bad that this is how I'm treating my family. And this isn't me. So like if you're experiencing that, or heavy painful periods, or really irregular cycles,
This,
um, or if you have really intense fatigue, if you have really low libido, which libido is a tricky one because that is hormonally related, but that also can come back to not being present. And it can be from just having like the monkey mind where you can't even be present for sex. Can also come down to body image insecurities, which I know for me, it was like my low libido was all of those things. But low libido is a hallmark sign of hormonal imbalance. What other ones, Mom? There's so many.
um, well, I think I mentioned sleep
Yeah.
issues, being able
Insomnia.
to, we see cortisol levels, which we ask people to test 4 times in the day because we're testing morning, evening, morning, noon, evening, nighttime cortisol. Morning cortisol should be highest. There's something called the cortisol awakening response. So you wake up in the morning, should be feeling great. But when you don't wake up in the morning feeling great and you're dragging, but at night you're ready to run a marathon, the
Yeah.
tired but wired, that's a very, very common sign of imbalance. Also, just feeling wired all the time, having a short fuse, not having patience, not being able to focus or concentrate, constantly being distracted by things. That's a tough one too, because of our environment with the steady feed that we've got. We're all trying to assimilate. I can't imagine what percentage increase in information we're all processing now since the digital age has happened.
Also,
And
sorry, Mom. I was just going to say weight
wait,
gain,
oh
weight
yeah,
gain, like inability to lose weight no matter what you do. Which again
belly
is
fat weight.
multifactorial, but yeah, specifically belly fat if you've never had it before. And we do have to preface, I always at least preface with, we also have to have realistic body standards. Like, I think sometimes it's like, oh, I have a little belly fat, and that is natural and normal as a female. But if you have, all of a sudden you're having all this belly fat that you never had before, and it's like, where did this come from? I can't get rid of it. That is typically cortisol, where your essentially your body starts to hang on to stored fat as a survival mechanism, because our bodies are always trying to keep us safe. And so if the body feels unsafe, like there might be famine or some form of danger, it's going to try to protect us. And one of the ways it's going to do that is by hanging on to that stored fat. And then other ways that it does it is like what we mentioned, like skipping ovulation. It down-regulates non-essential functions like reproduction and digestion. So you can also experience a lot of bloating, digestive issues, which can be hormonal, but also is gut health related, which if your gut health is off and your liver health is off, that impacts your hormones. So they all go hand in hand. And then if your nervous system is dysregulated, that's going to heighten that as well. So it's kind of like this perfect storm. So getting to the root through testing. And then for our family, we test in saliva because we found it to be more accurate than standard blood tests. A lot of doctors will offer standard blood testing, and that's included with insurance, which is why a lot of people get their hormones tested that way. But unfortunately, it doesn't give the whole picture. And I would say 90% of women that have come to work with us that have had their hormone levels tested in blood say that everything came back normal, and that's not how they feel. And saliva testing basically goes deeper. So it's picking up the active hormone levels that have left the bloodstream and gone into the cells where hormones actually do their work, versus a standard blood test that's measuring total circulating hormones throughout the whole body, so active and inactive. And then when you're testing for cortisol with saliva, we test 4 times throughout the day: morning, afternoon, evening, and before bed, because to my mom's point earlier, you want cortisol to be highest in the morning to help you get out of bed with energy, and to gradually taper off to its lowest point at night to help you sleep. So you need to see the whole diurnal curve, whereas a blood draw just pricks your finger once, gives you one result, and also can skew the results because most people don't like their finger pricked. So that can heighten your stress in the moment. And so we pick up what we call hidden hormonal imbalances, but we're also connecting the results with the specific symptoms that you fill in your test requisition form up front. So many women, I mean, pretty much I feel like 99.9% of women that work with us, they'll say they feel very validated. Like, okay, this actually makes sense, and there's a reason I've been feeling this way. I'm not crazy. A lot of them have been dismissed by doctors, or they've been told like, oh, you're just about to be in menopause, or that's just what happens when you hit 30, or like, oh, you're just stressed, like you need to take, or you have depression, you need to take a depression med, or just get on the skin medication, or get on hormonal birth control, that'll regulate things. And a lot of them have taken that advice and then been worse off for it, or intuitively they knew, I don't want to do that. And so then that's where they start to seek more support. And that's sometimes how they find us. Like they'll hear us on a podcast or something and be like, oh my gosh, I knew I wasn't crazy and I wanted to dig deeper. So there's all kinds of testing that you can do out there, but we love saliva as a really great foundational starting point that helps you dig deeper than a standard blood test.
Yeah, I have to say that I started when I was in that place where I was scaring my children and I knew I needed to do something. One of the first things I did was start researching what's going on with hormones. I mean, I knew that was what was happening, but I didn't, like so many women don't understand when they're in perimenopause, which is the transitional phase, don't understand really what's happening. We need a book on what to expect. I should write it, but to expect expecting,
Yes.
It's such a great one when you're pregnant. We need one when you're entering the zone of the menopause phases of life. But when I started doing that, it was saliva, because the research I did showed exactly what Jessie is saying, that when you're measuring saliva, you're looking at the active fraction of hormone. You don't, all that hormone that's in the bloodstream is carried on a red blood cell by a binding protein. So that hormone is bound, it's inactive. It is when we receive a signal from the pituitary saying, hey, she's over here working out. We need a little testosterone to be released to support that, the muscle strength. Then a fraction of that hormone actually breaks, becomes unbound, leaves the bloodstream and goes into the tissue and attaches or binds to a receptor site. And that's where it becomes really important to understand when women start to open their minds to using a bit of hormone, bioidentical plant-based hormones. It's because that may be necessary as we get older and our bodies are kind of running on empty. The important part to understand is that a plant-based hormone that's made to duplicate the exact molecular function and the molecular structure and function of a hormone, which is important to match up the hormone you're using if you're supplementing with your body's own hormones, so that's going to hit the receptor site. It's going to fit in just like a puzzle piece, lock and key. We often call it the hormone is the key and the receptor site is the lock. We want it to fit perfectly. That's when you don't have as many symptoms or side effects, but you do have the relief that you're longing for. And I'm not saying everyone needs to use hormones, but if you've been suppressing your hormone production for years and years, as many women have been doing when they start on birth control when they're 13 and they're still using it when they're 35, like with Jess, took her a year to get her period back. She needed a little help. She needed a little bit of progesterone, which is the key hormone that helps you, that signals the period and that helps you conceive and that supports a pregnancy, that first trimester. So sometimes we need a little bit of help and it needs to be in a natural, we're trying to duplicate natural physiology. By testing, we're confirming our symptoms as imbalances. Then we're linking them, as Jess mentioned, to the symptoms that they are strongly associated with, that helps us understand why we're having those symptoms. And then we're trying to take action to rebalance. And that will mean it's a holistic thing. It will mean lifestyle changes, dietary changes, the way you sleep, your sleep hygiene, the way you exercise, respecting cycle syncing, the different aspects of the menstrual cycle, and also supplements, herbs, and probably at some point some bioidentical hormones. When we test people, we always kind of get into the weeds with that and try to match it up with the person's individual needs, so that we're not just saying take this, this, and this, but we've got this whole formula that is sort of like, this is going to help, this is going to help, and this is going to help. So whatever helps is what we need to try, and everything we suggest is natural, because we're just trying to get back to that place where our bodies are stress resilient and know what to do.
I just wanted to say really quick that the one thing that I see repeated, and it's so natural because it's just kind of the society we're in. We are often seeking the quick fix, like the instant dopamine hit, the quick fix diet, the quick fix, like social media hit, whatever it is. It's why we swipe up on Instagram and just find ourselves purchasing random stuff we don't need. But I find and this is not everybody by any means, but I do see a pattern of sometimes women getting their hormones tested and just going straight to what supplements should I purchase? And then I'll do the lifestyle stuff later. And it's like, you can't just do the supplements. You can't out supplement, a really insane schedule where you're not leaving any time for yourself. You have to look at it's holistic. It's a 360 approach. So you have to be willing to part with some things that are draining you and to be able to recharge your battery by introducing things that are going to support you. And so it is mind, body, soul. It's mindset work, which I'm huge on supporting my clients with, because if you don't believe that you're capable of healing, then you won't. So it's mindset work. It is nervous system regulation work, mindfulness practices, mindful eating, mindful movement, mindful breath work. It's dialing in your nutrition. So blood sugar support, blood sugar balance, not just eating quote unquote healthy foods, but learning how to build a meal that's actually going to support your blood sugar levels, which will then improve your mood and your productivity and all of these other elements. And so, yes, supplements can help move the needle, and definitely bioidentical hormones like that progesterone cream. I absolutely needed that in order to get back a natural cycle. But it makes me sad when I see people just only wanting the supplements. And it's like, come on, like if we can just do that deeper work, you're going to see a phenomenal transformation.
Yeah, for sure. I've been reading this book. I just finished it yesterday. It's called The Slight Edge, and it talks all about the like simple daily disciplines that set us up for happiness and fulfillment and success. And like the whole point of the book is like it's these things that we would consider insignificant in the day to day that actually do compound into our happiness, our health, our financial success, our freedom. And I think that everything that you're saying is so on par with everything that I've been reading, because we do live in a society where we want everything done yesterday and we're impatient. And if something doesn't show a positive return immediately, we either walk away from it or question it or feel bad about ourselves or question even ourselves. And it was really helpful for me just like reading this book to reorient my relationship to the things that I do every single day and look at these little things that, yeah, for some might seem kind of insignificant or might not, relate tomorrow to me like having a six-pack abs or, whatever it might be, as like the building blocks of the future that I desire to create and the quality of life that I desire to create. So on that note, I'm going to ask a little bit selfishly, because we've been kind of talking about the pieces around this, but something that I started thinking about a year ago was, okay, if I want to have kids, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, is the way that I'm living my life sustainable and set up for me to be able to be the type of mom, have the type of pregnancy, and build the type of family that I desire to? And one of the big pieces of that is my body set up to be able to do this. And so I'm curious, for somebody that is desiring to start a family, has a stressful, busy life right now, and maybe it is the good stress, but just compounded on itself. What is the ideal timeline to start implementing these different changes, and what are the things that we need to be focusing on to set ourselves up holistically for success as it relates to conception, a healthy pregnancy, an easier birth? Like, what are the components of that?
Yeah. Well, I'll start and then Mom, you can
Okay.
comment. But I would say, I mean, if you're on hormonal birth control, ideally, and you're not ready to come off of it, let's just use that as an example to start, you would want to start prepping and priming your body to make that transition off hormonal birth control and give yourself at least, I would say, 3 to 6 months before you actually come off of hormonal birth control. Ideally, if you can. A lot of times when women get to the point where they're ready to come off, they want to come off tomorrow, which I get. And that might seem like the best choice, but because, like I said earlier, hormonal birth control depletes key vitamins and minerals, if you can bolster your system by starting to replete naturally before you come off of the pill, you're going to be in a much better position to not have what Dr. Jolene Brighton coins as post-birth control syndrome, which is this collection of symptoms that can come up if you just automatically go off the pill cold turkey. You can start to get this resurgence of symptoms that maybe you went on the pill to suppress, or even things that you hadn't experienced before. Like women will come off and have like crazy hormonal acne or like just all these different symptoms. And so if you can give yourself that 3 to 6 months to make that, I would say at least like 3 should be good to make that transition. That's really going to be supportive. And then I would say this, whether or not you're on or off hormonal birth control, but giving your body those key vitamins and minerals that it needs to house a healthy baby. And one way is going to be through a really high quality prenatal. And what I'll say about that is that there are a million prenatals out there, and most of them are garbage. And even the ones that most doctors recommend are terrible. And so there's a brand called We Natal, which I actually found through a podcast, and they live in LA, which I didn't know. And I've since gotten to meet up with them. We've had them on our podcast, and what they're doing is so incredible. They have all of these practitioners like Mark Hyman and Kelly LeVeque, like all backing them because of how incredible their prenatal is. And they actually started with a prenatal for men because they are best friends that had miscarriages 2 weeks apart. And they had like multiple, at least one of them had multiple miscarriages. And she was doing all the quote unquote right things. And then was like, why is no one talking about male fertility and like the role that they play? And so they actually started by creating a male prenatal because there wasn't a high quality one out there for males. And then they added the female one later. But if you have a partner, then certainly getting both of you on a prenatal because their fertility matters too. And that one has all of the right balance of the key vitamins and minerals that we need to support fertility and ovulation, which unfortunately, most of the ones I found out there don't. And then also just supporting your body with healthy fats is major because cholesterol is the backbone of hormone production. So if we're not eating enough fat, we won't be producing hormones in adequate amounts. And as we know, progesterone is the pregnancy hormone. We have to have adequate levels of progesterone relative to estrogen to get pregnant. And so you want to be supporting healthy progesterone levels. You can do that through healthy fats. Also, there's foods that are rich in B6, for example, that help promote progesterone production. So foods like bananas and chickpeas and oats and sweet potatoes. So kind of learning how to fuel your nutrition in a way that is not restrictive. I definitely, if you're dieting, if you're trying to lose weight, if you want to conceive, it's thinking about taking a break from that and really nourishing your body with enough food. Because again, the body, if it feels stress, which I help women release weight in the healthiest way possible, those that want to, that come to me for that type of coaching, but I will never decrease calories so low that they're in a state of starvation. But regardless of how healthfully I guide someone through weight loss, it is still a stress on the body. Like it just is. Your cortisol levels are naturally going to rise. Your thyroid is going to be naturally suppressed. And so it's important that you just, if you really want to get pregnant, you really need to be eating enough and to be eating a balance of proteins, fats, carbs. Carbs are really important. They get such a bad rap, but carbs are so important for ovulation. Again, it's keeping the body safe, which carbs can help the body feel safe. So carbohydrates, but it's focusing on nutrient-dense carbohydrates most of the time, like the complex carbohydrates. And it really is, like I said, blood sugar balance. So making sure at every meal you have, I always say at least 25 to 35 grams of protein, at least 1 to 2 servings of healthy fats, a nutrient-rich carbohydrate, fiber, which is incredibly important. Only 5% of the population gets the recommended daily value, which is about 35 grams for women. And fiber is not sexy the same way protein is on social media. It's like people still aren't talking about fiber in the same way. And so I have a lot of clients that are really confused about where do I find fiber outside of like Mucinex, or no, not Mucinex. What's the fiber supplement? I'm forgetting what it's called.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm like, I think Mucinex is a flu
that's
medication.
the cold one. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What is it called? Anyway, that's going to drive me crazy. But
X in it. I'm sure it has an X or a Z or a Y,
yeah,
something you can't pronounce.
like that. But yeah, fiber sources are avocados are really high in fiber, raspberries, blackberries are really high in fiber, chickpeas, you can do chickpea pasta, like those simple swaps you can make instead of just doing like a white pasta, swap it to a chickpea pasta or a red lentil pasta, which is a good source of carbohydrates and fiber and protein. And then, lentils, more
pudding.
What?
Chia pudding.
Oh yeah, chia. Yeah, chia is a good source of fiber. Flax seeds are really amazing. And actually, I would say for anybody focusing on fertility, 1 to 2 tablespoons of ground flax per day, because flax is a phytoestrogen, which can help regulate and balance estrogen and progesterone. It's also really great for improving hormonal symptoms, PMS, hot flashes. So that's a really easy one to add in. So yeah, and then the other thing I say is eat the rainbow of vitamins and minerals. So when you go to the grocery store and you're shopping in the produce section, instead of just getting green broccoli and red apples and like spinach every single time you go, try to add a lot of color to your cart, because the more color you add, the more vitamins and minerals that you have naturally from food. So you don't have to rely just on supplementation, because a lot of people tell me like, oh, well, I eat healthy and I don't mind eating the same thing over and over again, broccoli, chicken, rice. And it's like, okay, I guess on paper that is maybe healthy, but if you're only eating broccoli, chicken, and rice and olive oil, you're only getting those nutrients. So try to swap things up, like, getting in wild caught salmon, amazing source of omega-3s. And just maybe you have your base of the meals that you love, but you just swap out the protein type or you swap out the vegetable. So you're just getting variety that way. But I think an abundance versus a scarcity mindset is so key in life in general, but especially when it comes to fertility. It's like not looking at it like, what do I have to restrict or give up, but what can I add in? And then it also is stress, like building stress resilience. And I think this is something, Ava, you are obviously such a pro at, but like the simplest thing you can do every single day is to breathe. And I'm not sure, I mean, I'm sure you are, but there's this breath called the physiological breath. And that's one that has been game changing for me. And it's crazy that I only learned about it more recently, but essentially you inhale until you're about 80% of the way filled with air, and then you inhale a little bit more. So it's like 2 breaths, and then you exhale fully, like you take this long, long exhale. And they've done studies on this particular breath, and they've compared it to other types of breath work, like 4 square breathing and the 4-7-8 technique, which we both love. But it more quickly takes you out of sympathetic state and into parasympathetic, the rest and digest. So if you're going into a situation where you're really nervous, you're scared, you're just feeling so stressed out, if you do a few rounds of this, it can help so much. And so having something like that where it only takes a couple of minutes, but you can do it every single day, it's like these non-negotiables. And your body, again, it needs to feel safe in order to get pregnant. So thinking about these little ways that you can create more abundance in your life and just starting small, like, okay, tomorrow I'm just going to add in the new breath work, right? The breath that I'm going to try. And I'm going to go to the grocery store and add in a few more colors. And I'm going to make sure that I have a protein and a fiber at every meal. And then from there, layer on as you go. But it's, adding more abundance and then releasing what doesn't serve you. So I think what you can do is write a list of all of the current drains in your life. So what's draining you? And that can be people, that can be food, that can be drinks, that can be in certain environments that you're in, things that you've said yes to that you actually really wanted to say no to, and write down those drains. And then on the other side, write down what recharges you. It could be movement, it could be food, same type of thing. People, compare the lists and really start to think about how can I release some of these drains and add in some of these recharges. And a lot of times releasing the drains, it's not easy, but sometimes it is truly distancing yourself from people that bring you down, from people that are gossiping, from people that don't believe or see your vision. I have like a major example is I have a friend who has a huge Instagram platform. And when she got pregnant, she had so many moms come out of the woodworks, out of nowhere, telling her like, oh, you should be prepared never to sleep again. Like, this is going to happen. Your toddler is going to be like, you're never going to have a life again. You're never going to be able to get back in shape the way that you are. Like, good luck having an hour-long workout routine, and like all of these horrors that she should expect. And it's like, she had to just stop looking at those things and have someone on her team look at it. And she was getting so upset by it. And it's like, that's a perfect example of distance yourself from people that have that kind of narrative, that are trying to make you afraid of pregnancy. and afraid of what it's going to look like to be a mom, and surround yourself with people that have a good relationship with pregnancy, are excited to be a mom and have positive things to say. And of course, we need the real side. We need to be able to talk about the struggles or the fears that we have and the things that are actually hard about motherhood. But it's thinking about, like, do you have more positivity or more negativity in your life? Because if you are just draining yourself by saying yes constantly to things that you don't want to do, and surrounding yourself with people that just are not operating at that next level version that you're trying to get to, then it's really time to release and bring in more of the abundance.
I would say also that what, just remembering this woman I talked to the other day who said she was working out like a crazy lady, made me think about Jess and her mindset work, because at a certain point, the same woman said, I just have to be able to tell myself that I don't need to work out every single day. And I thought, she's ready to work with Jess, because, it's kind of that we do need to change our mindset and our approach to how we do things. And, like if you're wanting to be that best version of you and to be able to conceive, et cetera, yeah, all the planning that Jessie talked about, the preparation is absolutely important, but also giving yourself, based on what you were just saying, what are the drains? What are the things that recharge you? That could be a perfect reframing exercise so that you can start to get yourself to a place where, you're doing the things that you're not doing the things that are depleting you. For instance, how common is it to be on your cell phone or computer when you're in bed, right before bed? I was just talking to a couple who are kind of a high-powered celebrity couple, and the wife was saying, I look over in the bed and he's on his phone. And he's always on his phone, or where I'm over here doing some last minute work, we're not communicating anymore. So people aren't, they're not only communicating well, they're not sleeping well, because the blue screens are disrupting our sleep. They're disrupting our appetite hormones. They're disrupting our adrenal rhythms, et cetera. So there are changes we need to make in our sleep hygiene, in the way we work out. No, it's not okay to be a crazy lady working out. It's okay to not work out high impact every day, but it is okay to do something, to move your body in ways you love, that feel good, to do nothing, to stare into space in the morning and have a cup of tea and tell everybody, give me my 5 minutes peace. I need to not talk. I need some silence. I need to sketch. I need to, pick those things back up in your life that you love to do, scrapbooking, sketching, et cetera. And just to plug for testing hormones, I think if you have any of the symptoms we've discussed in this podcast, and you suspect that you probably have a hormone imbalance, don't let your symptoms become your definition of yourself. And this is just who I have to be and who I have to live with. Say, no, this is an issue I need to address. And I think the testing is where, in black and white, you're seeing these levels and you're saying, okay, I get it. And now we can tailor all of this stuff we're talking about to you. If you're a person who works out a lot constantly and you're not getting your period and you want to get pregnant, you're in a pickle right there, because that overtraining is going to keep you from ovulating. Again, it always gets back to ovulation. Too much stress disrupts ovulation. Low blood sugar and blood sugar instability disrupts, under eating the protein, the fat, all that stuff all goes back to that place where, if you're not ovulating, you're not going to be making the hormones you need to feel sane, calm, happy, balanced, ready to conceive, et cetera. So, it's all about awareness. Then I think setting your mind, working on, the old saying we used to say, well, if I set my mind to it, I can do it. Now it's kind of mindset. We're turning the words around, but it's the same sort of process, where this is a decision you have to make for your own health. And I would like to suggest, in response to that question, that your listeners get a hold of the book Woman Code by Alyssa Vitti. She's got a great chapter in there on feeding fertility. She had PCOS, which is a real issue with a lot of women, and is an infertility problem and has all kinds of problems attached to it. And she cured herself after being told that, oh, it's impossible to get rid of PCOS. It's pre-diabetic. You just have to take diabetes medicine. I'm here to say that is not an absolute necessity at all. But anyway, she wrote a book, that The Woman Code, that I think explains all of this to women in very helpful, instructive ways. She's also the author of the idea of cycle syncing, and in her book in the Flow, she talks about that. She also has a flow tracker. There are other fertility trackers, and this is something Jess is real expert at. But man, if you want to start thinking about conceiving, you need to start moving into a fertility awareness method and get off birth control. Weaning off would be one of the first things. Testing your hormones would be the next thing, so you can see, well, where are my levels? Are they low? Are they high? Or am I in shape to even contemplate this? And in general, if you've got the symptoms and you're suffering and you're struggling and you're feeling like hell and you don't want to feel that way, you want to be back to you again, test and find out what's happening so that you can take action. You don't have to suffer and be in that place that goes nowhere, in a rut, in a depressed rut. And antidepressants, by the way, hormone imbalance is not an antidepressant deficiency. It's not a Prozac deficiency.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the stress that you also, I'll speak personally, the stress that you put yourself under from not knowing what's going on and just like throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. Like that was probably one of the most stressful times of my life. I was so sad. I was so frustrated. I was so defeated too, because it's like, why does this work for somebody else, but it's not working for me? Why is it that I cut gluten for 2 years and I'm still experiencing all of these symptoms? Like I thought that this person had the answer for me. And again, it's like it really was coming down to, well, what's actually happening in my body? Because that person's body is different than my body. And even just having this conversation, I'm like, oh, it's been a couple years since I've done any testing. It's time again. I want to make sure that my body is in a position where, like we're talking about right now, that like I'm able to have the healthiest, hopefully easiest possible pregnancy when the time is right. So for everybody that is listening or watching right now, if you feel the pull as well, I definitely would suggest going through Candace and Jess, because they know what they're doing. And I mean, this conversation is just like one example of that. So for anybody that is listening who wants to work with y'all or get testing through you all, where can we find you and how can we start that process?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ava. This has been really fun. Obviously, we could chat all day.
Yes.
But you can find us at yourhormonebalance.com, and I'm over at bodyblissbygess.com. If you want to get your hormone levels tested, we did create the code ICONS50 so that your listeners and viewers can get $50 off our Build Your Own rebalancing test kit. Which is wonderful because you get to test your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol throughout the whole day, your DHEA. And then you'll get this whole education portal, which helps to guide you through next steps for nutrition and movement, all the things we've been talking about, that holistic approach. And if you want to dive even deeper and make it customized, you can add on a customized guide, which really breaks down your unique results and exactly what we recommend for supplementation and bioidentical hormones. And then you can even add on a call with my mom or myself if you want to have that deep dive into having my mom give you an interpretation of your results with next steps. And for me, as you can probably tell, I'm very much mindset, nutrition, movement, self-care, stress resilience, nervous system regulation. So yeah. And then we're over at same thing for Instagram. It's Your Hormone Balance and Body Bliss by Jess. I think that was everything.
Yeah. Except that we do have a symptom quiz also at our website, which is a great way to just hop on there. It's fun to do, and it gives you a likely scenario of whether or not it looks like, yeah, you probably have a hormone imbalance or you probably don't, but that's a good place to begin.
Awesome. Yeah. We're going to link everything in the show notes and in the comments or the whatever it's called, the YouTube description.
Yeah.
whatever it's called. But thank you
So
both so much for coming on the show. This has been so much fun and also just like so educational. I hope that everybody watching or listening has been able to take something away from this. Definitely go give them a follow on Instagram, go take the quiz, go get the testing done. You will not regret it. It is going to give you so much more to work with, so much more clarity as to your body, your experience, and where to move forward. So thank you all so much.